Hello, and welcome to the Product Insiders LinkedIn Live series, in which we interview product leaders and learn how they leverage customer insights to navigate tough product decisions. I'm your host, Zach Lyons, managing partner of Agile Innovation Advisors. If you're joining us live today, can you please enter where you are from in the chat so we know who is with us? Today, our special guest is Anders Fritz, VP and Senior Manager of Product Management, formerly at Capital One. We'll be asking Anders some questions, but if you have any specific questions for him as we talk, please enter them in the chat and we'll get to them in a bit. So with that, let's begin. Anders, thank you so much for joining us today.
Nice to meet you, Zach, and thanks for including me in this. I really appreciate when you reached out back in November and we started talking about this. And so I'm grateful that you included me in one of your series.
Well, I'm glad you had a little bit of time to spend with us at your busy day. I know you're busy. So what I'd like to do is just dive in and talk a little bit about a tough product decision you've had to navigate, at some point in your career. And thinking back on your career and some of the product decisions you've made, does one come to mind where you can tell us a little bit about your role at the time and the situation that you were facing?
So when you first asked me this, the situation or the product that came to mind is the first product that I managed as a product manager. And they say you never forget your first product because of a whole host of experiences you have. And this one was memorable for a range of reasons. The first one was I was very lucky to be part of a spectacular team with an engineering group that was just out of this world. The second reason is that we faced a classic buy versus build decision. I was working at Thomson Reuters, and we were part of the advanced product innovation group. And we were leveraging a vendor for analyzing that provided services to analyze usage of our emerging platforms and emerging services and mobile platforms. Okay. We weren't very happy about them because they provided, first of all, we lost our data. It was over with them. It was fairly challenging to get up to speed with them. And whenever we were asking questions, it took a long time to really get feedback. So we were ready to shift to a new vendor or start to build our own. And as we were looking at this, we're looking specifically, strategically, what is the strategic right decision to do? Should we outsource the capability to understand our users, or should we build our own capability to understand our users? And that was the kind of challenging decision that I was facing. And the key tool I leveraged was, let's summarize what is the customer problem that we're solving for here. And that is something that I used in subsequent roles to hone in on what is the customer problem we're solving for. Does it make sense for us to strategically own that solution ourselves or outsource it? And
okay,
go for it. Sorry.
I was just going to ask you, it's interesting. The buy versus build decision obviously is one that many organizations face. Thinking about that, decision, it's hard. But was there anything else around the context that made it even more challenging as far as outsourcing? Obviously, if it's strategic to the business, you don't want to outsource it. But was there anything else that made it a difficult decision? Just curious.
Yeah, we weren't sure we could build it ourselves. There was a strategic decision. Does it make sense for us to own it? But the other part was, could we actually build it? Did we have the talent? Did we have the infrastructure to actually build it ourselves? And that is a classic question that we face as product managers. Sure, the right solution is to go this way, but do we have not only the talent, do we have the infrastructure to support the decision that makes sense? And so that made it particularly hard for us to come to the right conclusion.
Very interesting. So, and then you mentioned a moment ago that you took a look at the customer problem that you were trying to solve to help navigate this decision. So maybe walk us through, what did you do? What insights did you gather, or what did you feel was key in helping you make this decision?
So we did a range of interviews with the current users of the capability to understand what they were looking for, to identify the challenges and the opportunities and the strengths that they were looking for. And a couple of different things stood out. So they wanted obviously a real-time understanding of what their users were doing on their platforms. So that's fairly straightforward. The other part is,
were these internal customers or external?
So this was an enterprise capability that we're building for Thomson Reuters platform. So this was an enterprise capability that we had a choice of either building out ourselves or outsourcing.
Right. So and then the users of that capability, were they internal customers or external, or a mix of both? Just trying to get
They were in the usage of the capability were internal platform owners that leverage this usage capability to understand external usage of their platforms.
Okay. Good. Thanks.
And go for it.
I was just trying to get clarity on that, so thank you. Appreciate that.
And the first feedback that we got from these owners was they needed to understand what their users were doing. The second one, they didn't want to spend weeks and weeks of implementing this platform, potentially having challenges in actually seeing what was happening with their usage. It needed to be plug and play and up right away. And the third challenge was, well, I don't have access to this data. What do I do if I want to put some document metadata or some industry data and overlay this with this usage data? How can I actually go into and really dig in and mine the rich usage data that I'm collecting? It's sitting on a different server, it's sitting outside of Thomson Reuters. I don't have ownership of it. And so, to paraphrase, as a customer, I'd like to not only understand what my users are doing with my platform, I also like to dig into long-term trends and put it into context on how a user can move between different platforms and whether I can overlay it with other pieces of information I have to get a richer and more in-depth understanding of my usage base.
Okay, so those two pieces of data were disparate right now. They were in different systems, so it would require the user to bring them together on their own, which is usually never easy, right, to do that. And if they can even do it. Interesting. And were there any other specific challenges that came to mind? Like, so obviously getting it up and running quickly, you mentioned, right? And then giving that capability to overlay different data.
So Thomson Reuters, and again, I've left Thomson Reuters now, so I'm not up to speed to the latest here, but the challenge for Thomson Reuters is some of these platforms may have spurts of usage. So you'd want to be able to, within sometimes seconds, minutes, be able to scale up on the fly to take in the extra data that comes in. News is one specific area that if a breaking news happens, then suddenly there's a rush to read those news articles. And so you want to have a system that technically can scale up on the fly and without any issues capture the range of that usage data without creating a large buffer that is cost effective. And you want to have it in real time. And so there were a few technical challenges that we had to resolve as well that made us look very carefully on the different solutions that we had.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. I'm curious about something. You mentioned that you looked at what the customer problem is you were trying to solve, and you've articulated some of this. I'm wondering, was there anything that you learned that at the beginning you didn't know, that as you were going through this process of trying to navigate this decision, that you learned or discovered that was sort of a surprise or an interesting, like an aha moment, like, oh, we didn't realize that, but now we know this, and this is going to actually dictate what we do. Does anything come to mind?
What the most profound learning I had from this experience was really to get into depth and understand how technology can help product decisions, because a lot of the customer research I was comfortable in, the business analytics I was comfortable in, because some of my background was in that area, the customer problem, the metrics, that was really, really powerful. But part of a product manager's area is also understanding how technology can help solve for your product solutions. And I was granted, I was supported by a absolutely superb technical team, and they had done a lot of research, but they were able to go and build a platform or a capability in AWS, natively in AWS, that were not only auto-scaling, but was also real-time streaming, that balanced the load of usage that could fluctuate quite significantly. And we were able to leverage things like Dockers and Kubernetes and serverless architecture and a whole range of very, very early cloud capabilities that if they hadn't been there, we probably would not have been successful in building this product. So part of it was the business and product and research part that, based on previous experiences, I was fairly comfortable with and I could leverage. But the thing that really I took away from this experience is that it's so important for a product leader to understand the technology in such a way, how does it impact your product decisions? You don't have to be an engineer, but how can you leverage the technology to enhance those product decisions and customer research and solve the customer problem?
It comes to mind is that Venn diagram, right? It's understanding of the business objectives, obviously understanding the customer and the customer problem, but then also understanding technology and how you can apply technology. It's sort of the overlap of those three. It's hard as a product manager, though, really, to be an expert in all three of those, right? So it sounds like this being one of your first roles, the technology piece was maybe not your strength, but you had a good team to rely on to help you understand technology and how to apply it.
I didn't realize at the time, but I was so blessed to have some very, very strong architects, some very, very strong individual engineers that were highly, highly educated. I didn't realize how lucky I was, because I got a very, very fast, in-depth education of how technology can leverage, how I can leverage technology to build these products. And it's something I've taken with me in every other product role since then, that the question is always, what are the options for solving these problems? That's the question I pose to my engineers that I partner with today. How, if this option solves it at 40%, but it will take 12 months, but maybe this option solves it at 120%, but it's only going to take 3 weeks, and kind of getting into that depth of how does the technology solutions that could potentially solve my product challenges, how do they work, and what's the benefits and drawbacks with them, is super important.
That's really interesting. So it's trade-off decisions, right? How long is this going to take to build versus what level are we going to actually address this need at? And I'm just curious, for other product managers, do you have any framework or way to sort of navigate that, like help you frame that up so that you can make a good decision with your engineering team?
It's a mix of being very focused on the outcome of the product decisions, as opposed to this is how I like it to happen. It's more about this is the outcome I'd like to happen, and giving my engineering team the flexibility and the trust to come back to me and say, well, we have 3 options. One of the options is going to take X amount of time and has these pros and cons. The other one will take Y amount of time and has these pros and cons. And the third one is going to take Z amount of time and has these pros and cons. And then it's up to me as a product leader to decide, what do I want to do? And then I can kind of face it into the other part of what the product life is about, which is the business metrics, the customer research, and the building consensus, the legal and compliance aspects. And that's a piece of a puzzle to kind of fit into the overall picture, so to speak.
Love it. Very clear. So I did cut you off. So what was the result of your effort at Thomson Reuters? What ended up
I had, first of all, it got me hooked onto product management, which perhaps was the greatest outcome. I'd been offered that if I didn't like it, I could divert into other roles, but it got me absolutely hooked in this role. From a more practical standpoint, we built this capability in 6 weeks. I don't think I've ever delivered a full product in 6 weeks. Since then, it was literally 3 sprints. Granted, we did about 3 months of research and planning and other aspects to make sure we knew what we were doing. We had our first platform using it within 2 weeks. And literally, when they looked at it, when they started implementing it until they were live, it took 30 minutes. In some platforms that were more complicated, it took an hour. And that was down from multiple weeks with external vendors. We ended up having all of our emergent platforms, mobile platforms, using it, but it really became a word of mouth kind of game. The platform owner's tech leader called up his buddy over there saying, "Hey, you should really talk to Anders. They have this really easy to implement and great, usage capability that you can leverage for your product." So the end result was that we were on track to, we ended up with somewhere north of or close to 100 different platforms within Thomson Reuters that started leveraging this. Now, granted, this was 8 years ago, so I moved on to other roles. I don't know the latest and what's been happening since, but the 2 years there, it was a fantastic experience, partly because of the people, partly because of it really went really, really well, and partly because of that customer feedback, which is so enriching from a product person's perspective.
Wow, fantastic. It sounds like a great experience. I'm going to check if there's anyone listening live and you do have questions for Anders, please enter them in the chat and we can get to them. I actually do have, in the meantime, I have one more question for you. I always love the retrospective, right? Thinking back on the experience. Obviously, it was a very positive experience for you. Got you hooked into product management, as you have said. Is there anything, though, you would have done differently, or, kind of looking back and how you navigated, maybe you could have been more efficient or learned something quicker? Anything that you would have changed?
I was thinking about this earlier today, and there are, I think there's some practical aspects we could probably have used a better visionary or visualization tool to visualize. And I'm blanking on what we used, but at the time we were looking at updating that at one point. I think more specifically, since then I've learned, I got an introduction to Agile, but I was very new to Agile and to product. But when you use Agile efficiently and in a smart way, it becomes a really powerful tool to power this innovation. And I wish I had known more about Agile when I started than I do now. But Agile and Agile thinking, iterative thinking, and looking at small pieces and tackling them and being ready to pivot depending on what you learn. It's just such a powerful tool. And we were in Agile, but I wish I had more of the academic knowledge around it, which I've since gained. And I wish I had more of it when I started.
So it sounds like not just the Agile development side, but also the whole customer discovery piece and how you can keep learning and doing as you go, sort of how powerful it can be. Okay. Continuously learning and doing discovery. It's a good point. And when you mentioned that tool, that visualization tool, is that for a internal audience, or what was the tool that you were saying you wish you had? You don't have to name it, but what the usage of it was for.
It was to visualize the data that we had. We were looking at multiple tools, and we ended up with one. And I think long term, we could probably end up in a more powerful visualization tool. I know we were looking at Google Graphing or something similar to use, but then life changed and I moved on to other careers. But there's a lot with that UI face that attracts users and keeps them hooked. And so being very smart around what is that UI, even if that is not the secret power that behind the product, but having that UI and making sure that that works well and how powerful that is a great way to build loyalty among your customers.
That's a good point. It's all part of the customer experience, right? It all has to fit together.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Anders, so much for sharing that story. I love it. We can wrap up on that point. I'm just seeing if there's any questions. I hope you learned at least one new thing from the conversation. I know I did. And I do encourage you, as always, to feel free to continue the discussion. You can enter your comments or questions in the chat. Obviously, we can get to them and continue it on, and like any other post on LinkedIn. And of course, if you need help navigating tough product decisions in your own job, you can always reach out to me and send me a direct message on LinkedIn. I do also encourage you to stay tuned for our next Product Insiders event, again, here on LinkedIn. We'll be doing another one next Friday. And if there are no questions, then we can wrap it up. And until next time, again, I'm your host, Zach Lyons with Agile Innovation Advisors. And Anders, again, thank you so much for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedule. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Zach, and have a great weekend.
Yes, you too. Take care. Thanks, Anders.